On this edition of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, part one of our special series entitled The Pioneers. Welcome to episode 40 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. We're back with something off the beaten baseball path, as for the next 3 weeks, you'll be getting 2 episodes a week. We'll have our regular Thursday episodes, but we'll also have a new episode earlier on in the week as we take a look back at baseball's history in this province and one era in particular. This series is called The Pioneers, where we profile the 3 cities that hosted Pioneer League baseball: Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, and Calgary. We'll start right at the very beginning with the first team to make its debut, the Lethbridge Expos. Baseball hit a fever pitch in the southern part of the province in the 1970s. After decades of solid club teams and leagues, as well as a few barnstorming MLB player visits, there was a sense more was on the horizon. The Lethbridge Lakers debuted in the Alberta Major Baseball League back in 1972, a league that saw several big names stop through. But you got the sense in reading articles from the Lethbridge Herald in those days that team president Reno Litzy wanted more himself. Just 2 years later, word started getting around that one of the relatively new MLB squads was looking to get a Pioneer League franchise. That team was the Montreal Expos. The St. Louis Cardinals were also interested in Pioneer expansion, but that didn't end up happening for a couple of more years. In November 1974, the announcement came the Lethbridge Expos would take to the field the following summer. While trying not to get everyone's hopes up for the team's debut, one Montreal official at the announcement proclaimed, quote, "I can assure you that you will see the slam-hangiest, hustling baseball club you have ever seen." Many of Montreal's 1975 draft picks ended up playing that summer in Lethbridge, including first-round pick and shortstop Art Miles, as well as second-rounder Dale McMullen and third-rounder Mitchell Coppola. And oh yeah, a guy by the name of Andre Dawson. We'll get back to him in a second. The Lethbridge Expos made their debut at Henderson Lake Stadium on June 25, 1975, against the Great Falls Giants. It didn't start off well, though, as the Giants picked up an 8-0 lead after the 5th inning. The home club made it interesting, though, scoring a few runs over the next 4 innings, clawing back to make it 8-7 in the 9th before the Giants finally stopped the bleeding. Skipper Van Kelly wasn't totally dismayed with the Expos' effort, though, applauding their refusal to quit. The club ended up losing their first 3 games of the season before finally beating the Giants in their series finale on June 28th. That first season saw many ups and downs for the new franchise, and right in the thick of things was a gentleman by the name of Alan Simpson. He was the Expos' first general manager, and he's also the founder of Baseball America. In researching this project, I was able to track down Simpson and had the chance to chat with him about his time in Lethbridge. Alan, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, Joe, it's my pleasure.
Take us back to 1974, 75, and where were you? How old were you? And how did it all come about that you ended up coming to Lethbridge?
Well, I was a guy with a passion for baseball. I grew up in British Columbia, more specifically in Kelowna, and I had always thought for about 10 years I was going to have a job in baseball, and in a very roundabout way, I got jobs in baseball before I actually came to Lethbridge. I had spent 3 summers in Alaska working for probably the best summer baseball team in the country, oddly enough, in Fairbanks. And I was 3 years into that, and I was thinking it's time to maybe pursue another opening. I just happened to be on my honeymoon. I'd gotten married in 1974 after the last of my 3 seasons in Alaska. And I was on my honeymoon in Florida, and I got an indication that the Expos were looking to put a Pioneer League club into Lethbridge. So I just conveniently ended up in Montreal about 3 days after that and talked to Jim Fanning, who was the general manager of the Expos at the time, just to pursue this potential opening there. And he didn't necessarily have say in terms of who the general manager was going to be, but I got to know Jim pretty well on that trip, and he certainly put in a good word for me. And I guess when I got back to BC for my honeymoon, I just contacted Reno Litzy, who was the president of this group that was putting this team into Lethbridge, and I went over and maybe a couple of weeks later and talked to Reno and this board of directors that was putting this team together, and quite to my surprise, in a sense, I got hired on the spot. So that was in October of 1974, and so I moved to Lethbridge, worked for the Canada Winter Games that were in Lethbridge that year, and began as soon as that ended, I started my just as it turned out 1 year with this Pioneer League club that had come into Lethbridge. I was at the time I was 25 years old.
Yeah, talk a little bit about being a 25-year-old and being in charge of a club. And granted, I don't know how much, or maybe you can go into this, is how much say you had in player personnel and that kind of thing. And being that young, you're not much older than a lot of the players even.
Well, no, I wasn't actually. Obviously there was Reno and I had a 20-man board of directors who made a lot of the big decisions, and I was there mainly to run the club off the field in terms of just getting a lot of things ready, selling advertising, and just doing a lot of the business decisions. I didn't have much say in the actual drafting of players or just anything to do on the player side. The Expos took care of that themselves, and it was my responsibility just to fill in the off-field stuff to just make it all work. And I just, I really had wanted more of an interest in the actual on-field itself, and it just it wasn't the way it was structured at the time. But it was, I was quite happy with what I was doing there, nonetheless.
Take us through that process of launching a new team in a new city, new idea in terms of affiliated baseball in Southern Alberta. I mean, the Expos were the first one to arrive here before the A's in Medicine Hat in 77 and Cardinals in Calgary also in 77. So you guys were the first on scene. Was it a tough sell in Lethbridge? Were the fans clamoring at the idea of having some future ball players play in their homegrown ballpark?
Well, Lethbridge really had, up until 1975, a pretty good history of some pretty quality baseball. They had, off and on, and since, I guess, in the 60s, were members of the Western Canada League with Calgary and Edmonton. I guess that wasn't the case beyond, let's say, 1964 for another 5 or 6 years after that. But in the immediate 3 years before that, they were members of the Alberta Major League, and that was a pretty good league. It was, again, Calgary and Edmonton and teams like that, and they were bringing in a few college players. So the quality of baseball was pretty good. I think the group in Lethbridge was eyeing a little bit a better brand of baseball, and they thought professional baseball was the next step to go in the Pioneer League. And the Pioneer League at that time, it had 4 clubs. One of the teams in Ogden, Utah, was independently run, so it didn't have a major league affiliation. And I think that's how it came to be that the Lethbridge was a prime opening once I think the president of the Pioneer League at the time, Ralph Nels, and the Lethbridge group approached the Expos about coming to Lethbridge, and that came to be. So it was effectively the Ogden club that moved to Lethbridge with this new affiliation. But it was, just because that they'd had this pretty good quality of baseball, 72 through 74 in the Alberta Major Baseball League. It was a lot of the mechanics were already in place, and it wasn't not necessarily something new for the fans of Lethbridge. But coincidental with all this, after the 74 season, the stadium had burned down. Henderson Stadium had burned, and they built a brand new stadium. So as the Expos came in 75, they were moving into what was effectively a brand new grandstand. So that added to the appeal.
When you look back on teams, especially those first few years of Pioneer Ball, is they had some pretty good players that went through, and you had one in particular, Andre Dawson. Walk us through your first impressions of him when he came into town and what you were expecting, and did he exceed expectations when he actually took the field?
Well, yeah, he certainly did exceed expectations, but coming in, he had been an 11th round draft pick from Florida A&M University. He signed for a bonus of $2,000, and so the expectations were not great. Now, he had some knee injuries, I guess, when he was in college. I think he played some football initially there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there wasn't great expectations. Mel Didier was the person that was looking after the player personnel for the Expos at the time. He happened to see him in college there and took a liking to him, so he came to Lethbridge, and it was pretty apparent right off the bat that he was a player. He played center field, and the other player that he played that had quite a prominent season the first year there was a fellow by the name of Andrew Dyes that played right field. And I thought they were kind of equally as a talent, but Dawson certainly separated himself after what was a great rookie season, and then he really took off the next year and was up in Montreal almost in I think at the end of the '76 season. So his climb to the big leagues was significant, and he did lead the league in home runs that year, and Dyes led the league in RBIs, and so Dawson was quiet as can be, and just very respectful as he was throughout his big league career. But boy, that talent, and he just carried himself like a professional right out the bat, and it was apparent right away that this kid had a chance.
Any challenges when it comes to bringing a bunch of newcomers to the pro game into a city that's new and bringing in a bunch of different cultures, I guess, all into one that way? Because I remember talking to Lloyd Mosby when he was inducted into the Canadian Hall of Fame last year, and he had to laugh about one day waking up in his hotel room and hearing, the sounds of cows and that coming, and it was a Medicine Hat Stampede. And so whether it was Whoop Up Days or anything else, were there any challenges on that front in getting players to kind of get used to the idea of, hey, you're a long ways away from home?
Well, yeah, in some cases, a lot of these kids that we got there that first year were right out of high school. We got most of the Expos draft picks from the '75 draft. We got the first rounder Art Miles, and the second rounder was Dale McMullen, and Mitch Cipolla was the third round. None of those guys went to the big leagues. In the case of Miles, it was obvious that he was a pretty good prospect, but he was very erratic. He made a bunch of errors. That's typical of somebody that's coming into the game right out of high school, whether you're a first rounder or not. But the unfortunate thing with Miles a couple of years down the road is that he was in West Palm Beach, which was the next level up in the Expos farm system, and that team won the league championship, and he, as part of that celebration of winning that championship, he dove into the intercoastal waterway off West Palm Beach and hit the bottom which was unbeknownst to him about 3 or 4 feet down, and broke his neck. So his career was over basically at that point. Just kind of a sad reflection on terms of where Miles' career went. But most of these kids would come into town and right out of high school in a lot of cases, and they were just lost in a way. I had people that one of the players in particular brought me his signing bonus money and said, "What do I do with this?" And so I got him sent off to a bank and just put it there temporarily until he could maybe invest it a little bit. And we had to find help find accommodation for most of the players, and otherwise they were at the ballpark a good amount of time, and just basically follow along and with playing baseball every single day and on the road half the time and stuff like that. But there were certainly some cases of helping young players, 17, 18, 19 years old, just to help get their feet on the ground a little bit to get their careers started.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on your time personally in Lethbridge, what sticks out most for you?
Well, it was just it was working with a great bunch of people there. Let's see, as I've mentioned, was the president of the club. There were 20 directors on the club, just a great group of people there, and just being exposed to professional baseball. The previous 3 summers, it was I'd been with a semi-pro club in Alaska, and so there's no real exposure to the professional game at that point. But you just got to see all the Expos people that would come into town. The president, John McHale, at the time of the Montreal Expos came, and pretty much everybody that was associated with the Expos would pop into Lethbridge at some point during during the season, so there was some acquaintances I developed that way. But just being the general manager of a professional baseball team, I thought was a pretty neat deal at the age of 25.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things too that, as you look back on it, and clearly you've had quite the career when it comes to baseball, and yet, as you were mentioning to me before we hit the record button, is this might not have exactly been the frame of mind, because after that 1 year in Lethbridge, you were thinking about, hey, this might not be the way it goes. Walk us through sort of your career and how it ended up coming to be where you ended up masterminding Baseball America.
Well, I had developed quite a passion for baseball, I guess, almost when I was a young teenager, I guess, and I had this dream that I would get involved with the game in some fashion or another, and so I did everything I could, I guess, to get to make myself familiar with the game, and tried to do it growing up in Kelowna and doing things around there. I knew it wasn't going to take me very far, so I actually in the 3 years prior to coming to Lethbridge, as I mentioned, I spent 3 summers up in Alaska, and our team went back and won the national semi-pro championship in Wichita, Kansas. Each of those 3 years, we had Dave Winfield and Floyd Bannister and Steve Kemp and a lot of those players that were on those teams. And I think that just fueled my enthusiasm to keep going in the game, and so I got this job in Lethbridge, and as it turned out, I was only hired for 6 months of the year. I was making $700. I'd just gotten married, and I came to the realization, I've got to get on with my life here at some point. This working 6 months of the year is just not going to get me very far. So I just made a decision after that first season, as much as I enjoyed it, that I had to go back and finish off school, which I did, and I went back to the Okanagan and became an accountant for 3 or 4 years. But while I was doing that, I think I got the realization, I really do want a career in baseball, and I'm not sure how to go about it, because I was still having all these immigration issues that basically caused me to stop. After Lethbridge, we're still there, and so I came to the realization that maybe one of the only options I really had at the time was starting a baseball newspaper. I was a huge fan of the sporting news, which covered baseball tremendously in the 60s and the better part of the 70s, but its baseball coverage was falling off quite significantly in the late 70s, and so I just decided, well, if nobody else is going to jump in, well, why don't I jump in? I knew it was going to be a heck of a challenge, but so that's how Baseball America came to be. I moved to White Rock, BC, and set up an office in the home of my garage there. And so for the first couple of years, Baseball America was published from there until I got an opportunity to sell it and sell a portion of it and move with it to Durham, North Carolina, which is where I am at this point.
If you could go back in time and meet up with 24, 25-year-old self, do you think that you'd be shocked at how far you've come and what you ended up doing with your life?
Well, yeah, it's definitely gone a different direction than I anticipated. I had thought baseball might be in my future there somehow, but I just, with all the immigration hurdles that I had to clear at the time to move on from Lethbridge, that I thought I was a dead end. I just was getting on with my life, and I had no sense that I would get back into baseball and have it take me where it's taken me over this 35 years. And Baseball America is obviously thriving still, and I'm not sure that the life expectancy of a newspaper would have been that great, especially under the circumstances. I tried to get it off the ground because I had no publishing experience and just capital. I just had a limited bank account, and just as a one-man operation, but managed to get it up on its feet, and here it is, almost 40 years later, still going. And I'm retired now, but I still keep a pretty close tabs on what's going on there and stuff. So it's I would never have envisioned when I was in Lethbridge that 40 some years later I'd be in Durham, North Carolina.
It's an amazing career, something that is amazing to read through, and fantastic to be able to regale in some of the stories. I do appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, Joe, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
The Expos would last just one more season in Lethbridge before a change of affiliation turned them into Lethbridge Dodgers from 1977 until 1983. They actually won the league titles in 77, 79, and 80. Several factors led to the Dodgers leaving town after the 83 campaign, including the sale of beer at the stadium. A weird one there. The Pioneer League came back to Lethbridge in 1992 as the Mounties came into being. They lasted until 1995 when an affiliation was announced with the soon-to-be new Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, they actually didn't come into the majors until 1998, which coincidentally was the final year for the Lethbridge Black Diamonds, who moved to Missoula for the 99 campaign. The winds of change certainly followed the Pioneer League's existence in Lethbridge. For more on this story, including quotes and photos we found in the Lethbridge Herald's archives, head to albertadugoutstories.com for our full story. As for the parent club, the Expos actually weren't done with Alberta yet. More on that in episodes to come. Again, thanks to Alan Simpson for joining us on the podcast, and thanks to all of you for downloading and listening. If you love baseball history like this, make sure to share this episode on all of your social media platforms and tag us as well. Like I said, this is just part one of our special trip down memory lane, and would love to hear from anyone who remembers these clubs. And don't forget to subscribe as well, as we'll have another episode ready on Thursday and another Pioneer League feature next week. Until next time, thank you all again for all of your support of Alberta Dugout Stories.